Welcome to the FilmSEEN podcast.
All right, guys. Well, today on FilmSEEN, we're so thrilled to have writer and director of the punk rock horror film, The Ranger, Jenn Wexler, and her producer, Heather Buckley. Welcome, Jenn and Heather.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So excited. I think we're good.
How's the quarantine been treating you guys?
Quarantine was treating me well. It's a lot like, as some people have posted, like being sent to your room just to watch, Netflix all day long and listen to records and music.
Yeah.
I haven't left my apartment in like 65 days or something.
Like at all? Like you have not been out in the open air?
Like I go out from time to time to get my mail and stuff, but pretty much I've been just trying to stay inside as much as possible. Because I'm in the middle of Brooklyn and there's a lot of people outside and I'm terrified, maybe because I've seen too many horror movies. I'm scared of contracting this thing. So I just try to stay in as much as possible.
Have you changed as a human being, Jen, being indoors that long?
I miss human interaction. I miss drinking in bars with my friends. But overall, I'm just looking at it as a way to really like focus on my projects and just like try to get shit done.
Yeah, that's the best I think we could do. That's what I'm doing, for sure. My DP has not left his apartment at all. Like he has not had a breath of fresh air since this thing has started in months.
Wow.
Yeah. But, and sort of early on in this thing, he's already sort of a hypochondriac. So this has just magnified everything, like we did a shoot in early February when he was just hearing about this and he was like wearing gloves and all this stuff. And I'm like, Alex, what are you doing? He's like, I'm telling you, he's like, this is going to be really bad. This is going to be really bad. I'm like, calm down, dude. It's going to be fine. And so I guess he was right in some ways.
He was ahead of the curve.
He was ahead of the curve. I guess I was ahead of the curve too, because I was planning on taking a trip at kind of early on in that time, and my gut instinct told me just don't take that trip. Just and I'm a very instinctual person. So I guess tell us a little bit about the premise of the film, Jen.
So The Ranger is about a bunch of punk kids who get in trouble with the cops, and then they go out to the woods to hide out, where they come up against a killer park ranger who starts to take them out one by one. And it's kind of a mashup of, it's my ode to 80s slashers meets 80s punk movies.
Nice. And actually, I love the scene, amongst many other scenes, but I love the scene where they're actually at the punk show in the beginning because, there's so many movies that don't get that right. And I thought that was really cool how that was depicted. Well,
Heather Buckley here threw us a punk show.
One of the many tasks given to me by my beloved close friend and sister, Jenn Wexler, is that she wanted a punk show. So as we know, Zeph and I are part of the very similar punk scene, is that a lot of the medium-sized venues are closed, like people like Coney Island High, CBGBs, and things like that. So I got a tip to go to Don Pedro's in Brooklyn, which is not necessarily like my scene. I didn't really hang out there. But it was a cold, slushy day. We were looking at all these places, and I was parked outside of my totally beat up car. And Jen and Ashley, scene where the producers were inside there for a long period of time. It's like, did anything happen? And it's like, no. They loved it. They loved it. So it was an original space punk rock venue. We shot it upstairs and downstairs. And the way that I invited people, it's like we look for a great band to be there. I asked the hairdresser, the punk rock hairdresser of the film, Patrick Rogers, who he would suggest. He suggested, out of many bands, Rotten UK, who looks like they were preserved in sort of like this 80s punk rock, death rock look. And we invited everyone from New Jersey and New York City that I could. There's a lot of my friends in the movies, and I wanted to make sure one thing happened, and I blessed my PA Adam for that, is that I wanted everyone to come in to get their names, so at the end we could put like the punks and list every single punk that was in that scene. And if you pause that scene, maybe you'll recognize some names of people who have been at shows. But those are
also like so many of our friends came in and partied with us that day. Like so many people from the film horror scene, like Ted Gagan, horror director, and Michael Gingold and Frank Sabatella. Like so many of our buddies came and hung out with us.
Yeah, we have a picture of Mike Gingold wearing like an O-ring collar and a t-shirt. Also, there's cameos by your dad.
Oh, my dad's in that scene. My dad plays one of the cops. He loved it. He had so much fun that day.
That's awesome.
He's arresting Jocko, right?
No, he's arresting Ted.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So I have a funny story for you guys. Back in the day, but I was friendly with this band Agnostic Front, and there's a guy named Vinny Stigma that when I was 19 years old, he was like, hey, do you want to be in a movie as an extra? I'm like, yeah, I'll be in it. He's like, they'll pay you $50 a day. We're playing a show at the Guggenheim Museum. I'm like, at the Guggenheim Museum? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And apparently the director was Matthew Barney.
Matthew Barney, yep. I've seen the videos when I went there, and I called up my friend Josh, and I had no idea that you are in the Guggenheim Museum. Oh my God, you're in those videos. I'm in that.
So here's what's funny about it, right? So the first day was really weird. It was like a really, like, to say art house movie. I watched a lot of art house movie. This is beyond an art house movie. This was a very avant-garde sort of film. Matthew Barney at the time was married to Bjork, and I guess he just made these movies that were super avant-garde. And there was Agnostic Front was playing at the Guggenheim, and then there was like, people kind of making like a circle pit around this guy who's dressed up in this weird makeup, and that was Matthew Barney himself. And he made the mistake of telling like the punk rockers, like, hey, if you guys want to kick me or like something while you're dancing, it's like, it doesn't matter. And then it was idiotic. People were going in. I wasn't, but people were kind of abusing that a little bit too.
Whoa.
But anyway, so I didn't even, it was like a 2-day shoot. And then I think it was like a year or two before the movie came out. And I was an early adopter of Netflix, like back when they had the DVDs and I remember going home from college and my parents were away. Everybody was away. I'm like, let me watch this movie that I was in. So I had a few beers. I queue up this movie, and I had a sort of surreal experience because it was hands down the weirdest movie that I've ever seen in my life, and I was in it.
What was it called?
It's called The Cream Master 3.
Oh, is that different from the Cremaster Cycle, or is that?
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, it's the Cremaster films.
I've heard about it. I've never seen it, but I've heard.
Yeah,
I've only seen it when I was in the Guggenheim, just as part of the exhibit. I didn't know that you were part of the full movie. That's so great. I'm going to have to get it because I remember it's like I was walking with my friend, and on the bottom, did you go to the exhibit at the Guggenheim?
I did not.
Because on the floor, and sort of like white on white was a big New York hardcore symbol. And then when I looked up, I think it was it Agnostic Front and Murphy's Law? So it was two hardcore bands with two different like punk rock people doing circle pits with white gloves on.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God, that's my friend Josh Goodman. And I texted him and I said, you're at the Guggenheim Museum.
Yeah. Yeah, I was there. It's funny. Yeah, it was just sort of a surreal experience.
Also famous. You're famous. All right. I didn't know what we were talking about.
You have to press pause to even find me, but yeah, I guess. and I didn't even make it through the whole movie. I think I watched 3/4 of the movie because there's no narrative of the movie at all. It's like, it only makes sense to Matthew Barney, the guy that made it.
His work to me is very inspirational and beautiful. And I think that whole cycle, the Cremaster, like as a horror fan, that like the goat images and things shoved in his face with all the blood.
Maybe, I have to revisit it. My taste has definitely evolved since I'm 19 years old. When I was 19, I didn't even watch foreign films. And now, I mostly watch foreign films, I would say, so I have to revisit it. So tell me about the inception of The Ranger. How did you first conceive of the idea of the film?
So I went to college. I majored in screenwriting, and one of my classmates, Jocko Farino, we had to write these senior thesis screenplays for our final year, and his screenplay was The Ranger. It was much more of a body count horror movie, and the whole stuff with Chelsea, the main character's arc wasn't quite there, but I was really into this concept of like punks versus park ranger. It felt really 80s. It felt really like comic book. It felt like something that already should have been made. And so I just like was obsessed with his idea, but we didn't know how to make movies yet. So after a couple years, I started working for Glass Eye Pix. I learned how to produce movies. And then when I thought about what I wanted to direct for my first feature, I remembered his script for The Ranger. And I was like, yo, man, can you find that? And can we like work on it together and update it to our current sensibilities? And so we did that. And yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And did you guys have to redraft it several times? Was that an intense rewriting process?
Yeah, it's it's just part of the process. But it was helpful to work off of the thing that already existed. I always find writing is so much easier like once I have a draft. The hardest thing is always staring at the blank page, right? So when you're working off of something that already exists, everything just flows so much easier.
What was your process of working with Jocko? I always love to hear that.
It's so funny. We're working on something right now, a new script, and our process right now in quarantine is we have a Zoom video conference, and Jocko writes down all the ideas, and we talk back and forth. But today he was like, Jen, I'm getting big Hollywood energy because I just was like going off on all these like rants about things, and I had this ball I was like throwing up in the air, and meanwhile, he was typing everything like furiously as I was saying it. So that's not our routine every day, but that was our routine this morning.
Nice.
I approve.
The punk rock element was there from the first draft of the script. Was that there even in his draft before you got it?
Yeah, it was always punks versus park ranger. And we used to go to shows and stuff when we were teenagers. He was from the Philly scene. I grew up in New Jersey. But I think it was just this shared love, and we both knew those kinds of kids. So especially when we met up again to rework on it, it all flowed really easily. And we kind of funneled our frustrations of stuff we dealt with when we were teenagers into the script. Like, kids being assholes to each other. Like the punks all love each other, but at the same time they're dicks to each other. So we took all that when we funneled it.
No, I thought that was really very accurate about how they went to the cabin, and she's just trying to have them be just even slightly respectful, and then just they don't give a shit,
Yeah.
and or even about her uncle passing away. They're not even respectful about that. They're like at first cracking jokes about it, and then at best just being sort of awkwardly silent about it. So I thought, that was sort of spot on.
When I originally read the script, I told Jen, it's like, how do you know our secrets? Because there's so much like the East Coast assholes that we know, beloved assholes I want to mention in the punk scene is always making fun of each other. Like if a band is playing, who's ever like trolling that band the hardest, that's like your best friend. That's how you know you're loved on the East Coast, if you're taken down that way all the time. But that was one reason that I love the authenticity of the characters and the language, and being a punk rocker myself, to see that, to see it on paper, and then the manifestation of Jen's amazing work as director. It was like whatever was on that page, that script that we read, that's exactly the movie that Jen delivered.
Nice. Yeah. And what I think is kind of cool about it too is, aside from it being a punk rock horror film, which is awesome, I think there was a lot of interesting character stuff too with Chelsea. I think there was a lot of nuanced sort of stuff with her revisiting the cabin and kind of thinking about her childhood, and then assessing her current group of friends and the dynamics of how they're behaving. So I thought that was pretty interesting of what you guys pulled off.
Yeah. I also think there's something about, being a poser, right? So her group of friends, they're all like, essentially they're all accusing her of being a poser, but really they're all the posers. They're all, trying to use these they're trying to use their clothing to like prove that there's something, but it only goes, so deep. It's all very surface.
Right.
Being able to name drop bands, showing, stuff you're wearing, whatever, or having this like dickish kind of attitude. It's all a surface kind of thing. And meanwhile, you have the Ranger, and he's also wearing his own, the punks are wearing their uniform. He's wearing his uniform. Everyone's trying to like be a certain thing. And then you just have Chelsea in the middle of it, and she's just trying to figure out who she is despite all the noise around her. And I think, I liked playing around with the idea of like, who's really the poser.
No, I actually picked that up because toward the end of the movie, and I'm not trying to give away any spoilers here, but her behavior toward the Ranger and her sort of defiance toward him, I was like, well, she's actually the really real deal punk there when she's refusing the food and, just kind of like having an attitude of fuck you to him in that moment where it could be very deadly for her. So yeah, I definitely picked that up, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. Deep down. He's the punk all along.
It was kind of fun. I thought it was funny too, how he kept quoting kind of like the laws of, did you guys take that from somewhere? It's like littering is section 3.4 or whatever it was, I don't want to misquote it, but
yeah.
that was pretty good.
Our executive producer runs a tour company around the Grand Canyon, and he came to set with this whole list of actual park codes. And it was, so we did some last minute adjustments on the script and we added that in, and it was great. It fits his character quite well.
Yeah. And for me, I like films that reward repeat watchability. For me, that's a big thing. And, I'd seen your film when it first came out after I met you guys. And funny enough, I have to tell you the story of how I first heard of your film. I've heard of it before I met the two of you through Instagram, because I think I saw one of the actors who must be like a friend of a friend of a friend type of thing put out a posting. And I was like, wait a minute, I saw a photo where somebody's wearing a punk jacket. He's like, I was an actor in this movie. It was like a punk rock horror film. I was like, whoa, well, that looks kind of interesting. I definitely want to check that out. So that's
good. Our word of mouth.
Granite. It was Granite, right?
Right. Granite. Yes, that's his name. Yeah. Yeah. And he's Albanian, because I could tell by his name. I'm assuming he's Albanian, and I'm Albanian.
Yeah.
So I think, we must have had some friends in common or something.
No, he brought a real authenticity to the role. I think that's one of his, was that his first feature, Jen?
I think it was his first feature, yeah.
And the way that he took the dialogue, it felt very street. It reminded me of like a lot of the New York hardcore boys. And he had like that great accent, that regional accent to the New York City area. Yeah,
for sure. And I could definitely, he definitely sold it. And especially when they go to the basement of the Ranger and it's like, dude, shut up. Like,
yeah.
Stop talking.
Yeah.
It's like, try to be discreet. And it's like that character just was not able to do that.
Yeah. Granite's amazing. He definitely went from when he came in from, my first meeting with him, I like felt that chaotic energy and I was like, this is perfect for Guy.
So actually another thing, well, when I was talking about rewarding the repeat watchability, it sort of felt innocuous the first time I saw it, but that song, The Most Beautiful Girl, it's so much creepier on subsequent viewings for some reason. Like, it's really it's very disturbing. And
yeah.
I don't even know if I could articulate why, but.
Well, yeah. I mean, we all fell in love with that song too. That was Jeremy, who plays the Ranger, was singing it on set. And that was just part of, him finding the character. This was a song that he felt was the Ranger's character. So he would sing it on set, and we got some of it. Our sound guy got some of it. So we had these little recordings of him singing it. And we were just playing with it in post, and we were like, well, let's try dropping the song in there and see how it plays. And it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is supposed to be part of the movie.
Jeremy is a magical actor because he would not break character even in between breaks. It's like a gift. It was a gift to the movie.
Wow. That's intense.
PSAs, missing trees, lurking about. It's the best.
He does a lot of lurking.
That's funny. So Jen, what's your process in terms of like visually? Do you like with your DP, like do you work off shot lists? Do you make storyboards, like floor plans? How do you typically visually plan out the shooting of the film?
So first, even when I'm still developing the script, I'm putting together, mood boards and lookbooks and stuff. So I'm figuring it out for myself what the overall aesthetic is way before I ever talk to any department head. And then that way the department heads, they come in, they see my materials and they know like what world we're working in. And they understand what the overall style and the aesthetic is. And then, you go to the location, you see what you're going to be using within the location, or if you're going to be building a location, building a set. And then it's just a lot of conversation. And then, I usually create storyboards for myself, and then I create shot lists that I actually share with the DP. And sometimes if I'm not communicating something well, I'll show him the storyboard, or, we'll go back and forth and write out the most effective way to get the shot. But I try to give as much information up front, and then that way when they come back to me with their ideas, we're speaking the same language.
Nice. Yeah. Was there specific films that you were sort of referencing as like kind of mood pieces, or just kind of inspirations for any?
Yeah. Well, definitely wanted to embrace this kind of 80s horror aesthetic. Like Creep Show was really on my mind because it has the comic book element to it. But then, because the Ranger, it's all about Chelsea, there were moments that I also wanted to get subjective in her perspective. And I think that is much more of a, 2000, like late 2000s indie kind of aesthetic where we have kind of, some scenes with more, when she's like by herself, like softer focus, and we're following her around the woods and things like that. So it's kind of a blending of all of those things.
And we also looked at a lot of 80s punk references, like the classics that are Return of the Living Dead. I know you mentioned Class of 1984.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of like look and feel and color, I was definitely thinking about Return of the Living Dead and Class of 1984 and Repo Man. Definitely in terms of like production design, we're thinking a lot about Repo Man. Unfortunately, I wish I could have had, our production wasn't quite equipped to be able to handle this, but it would have been a dream to be able to have our convenience store have the shelves just stocked with like fake brands and stuff, a la Repo Man, just having like bread or beer. But we shot in a real convenience store, so we couldn't actually do that.
Yeah, I like the convenience store scene. Actually, that was how long was the shoot in general? How many days did you guys have to make the film?
It was like 18 days, and then we, a couple months later, did a couple pickups to do things like the close-up of the boom box exploding, and we did some of our drone shots and things like that. Stuff we didn't need the cast for.
That makes sense.
And it shows you a way of, because we watched many iterations of the film, but just sort of the places to cut away and the energy in the air that sort of like B-roll gives you. I think it's see how that, helps shape the film.
It's really helpful, I think, from a producing perspective and from a directing perspective. It's nice when you're able to budget for a couple pickup days and you'll have those pickup days, because then you are able to have your cut of the movie and feel safe knowing that, okay, we're going to fill out this scene a little bit by getting this one or two other things. So even as a producer, I try to budget for that.
Yeah, I did the same exact thing on my feature film. It was about the same shooting schedule, and then we had a bunch of days, a bunch of pickups after that initial stretch of principal.
Were the pickups sort of like B-roll, or were they?
No, there were a lot of B-roll, but then there were also some full-on scenes. And I hate doing reshoots, but there was a couple of things that we ended up doing reshoots on, and because our film was sort of a non-linear time film, there was a couple of things that ended up getting changed and sort of enhanced in some of those extra days. but we I guess we knew that we would have him, as well. So it was kind of planned out that way.
Yeah.
So how did you guys meet?
Oh my God. So I've had many lives. Before I became a film producer, I worked in New York City advertising, and I used to moonlight just for the joy of it for Dread Central and Fangoria magazine, print, and then one Gore Zone issue. And I would go to Film Fest. I would go to Fantasia. I would hang out. I knew about Larry. I knew about Glass Eye Picks a long time ago. My writing partner and someone who I do my extras with, Ethan Halo, told me I needed to meet two people in my life. One was Larry and one was Michael Felsher. And I got on to work with both of them. So I just knew Jenn. Jenn was so cool. Jenn's look, it's like the black eyeliner, like Joan Jett, and the boots and all in black. And she was so cool. And I loved hanging out with her. And the reason she gave me the script, and it was just because I myself am punk rock. And she goes, would you just read this? And I was so inspired by it. And I was just giving her showing her stuff on Tumblr, punk rock images or crazy 80s images. And then at some point I wanted to pitch it for her. So that was my involvement in the Ranger, but I just knew her just from hanging out. And the whole process was, it's like, I loved her. She's so cool. She had great passion for this project. And I knew that I could have added a little, I knew where to get the punk rock and how to present it to her, because Jenn wanted the punk rock, the authenticity is I know where to get that for you. And then I was able to do my little glitter magic in the film to help her with her vision. But the first time I think we ever worked on anything professionally was in Most Beautiful Island, where I am an extra, and I shouldn't be that noticeable in this film, but the camera pans with the lead and I'm in the background of this coffee scene. And when I was at South by Southwest, I was doing some journalism work. Everyone's going Heather, are you in Most Beautiful Island? And then when I saw it after it won the main award, because Jenn produced it, there it was. But she sent out an email, and it's like, Jenn's asking me to be an extra at Glass Eye Picks thing. It's like, I still have, because on set, we don't use water bottles. You make your own Ranger water bottle and you fill that up. So we have to have our cup, and you put your name on it, and that is your cup all day long, because I was an extra. And so I still have that cup. It had tacky 70s colors on it, and HB. It's in one of my auditorium boxes. But that's how we met. It's it's a community here. We all love horror. We all support one another. And I just happened to go on to, and it was I was honored to work with Jenn. I feel so honored that she asked me to be a producer on it. And then, of course, with, Glass Eye, which is just to me a legendary great place. The original thing that I was introduced to Larry was Habit. It was the commentary. And Ethan goes Heather, you need to listen to his commentary. We should need to meet him one day. And meeting Larry is its own fun story for another time. Nice.
What's one of the things that you appreciate about working with Jenn?
We're very close friends, so it's the complete fearlessness and openness of communication. It's I feel that Jenn can tell me anything and any ideas, and she also knows that I respect and love. Though I'm writer, creator, artist, whatever. It's I am there for Jenn's vision, and I think it's part of the reason I was a creative director, creative lead in advertising, because though I could create beautiful Bauhaus designs, I was always curious as what with material or their own material, how does one create their vision? I love the process of the manifestation of what Jenn wanted to do and have it be 100% Jenn. And we're working on getting this other movie off the ground, which you can ask us about later. And it's the same thing there. It's it's Jenn's script. Jenn's going to direct. I'm very invested in seeing Jenn's vision because I love her, and it's also the world's of. There's an audience for her style and the stories she wants to tell, and her stories about femininity and punk rock girls and rebellious girls and demon girls. It's really important.
We click over a lot of things, and I agree. Heather is what Heather said about our communication. We're such good friends, so there's always this open flow of communication, constant texts and calls or whatever, or not. Like I could also go 2 weeks without talking to Heather, but like it's chill no matter way. We have the constant flow when we want it. And Heather, if I could say a couple lovely things about Heather, is that Heather is so wonderful and passionate and knowledgeable. And she, you know, when she has something she sets her mind to do, like she does not stop until that shit gets done. She is an amazing partner.
And that relentlessness in independent filmmaking is a crucial prerequisite. So it's
crucial.
You guys have the best sort of creative, collaborative spirit going on. So that's awesome. And I will say that for me, I'm sure, I don't want to speak for you, Heather, but for me coming out of like the scene and like punk rock, the whole DIY sensibility toward things for me was like an important prerequisite into independent filmmaking. That kind of, hey, I'm just going to do this. I don't want to wait for like a studio to green light me. I'm going to figure out a way to make this happen kind of mentality. Well,
you know your own value without without external sort of pop culture value. I knew this work had value. I know we all have value, and we should just go out and do it ourselves. I think that was always a vibe behind it. I think Larry always talks about the punk rock vibe of Glass Eye Picks, and also part of punk rock is bringing the community together, working with different artists, bringing up a crew, creating leadership. I mean, the word crew used both in punk rock world and in film world, and also how Jenn and I went on tour with the movie to all the film fest, and we stood together. And when some girls like saw Jenn, my favorite story is like they would come up to her, they would break down and cry. They did the representation of a woman making horror movies meant so much to them, and also how we did all the marketing to it. That was all grassroots. That was Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we just got out there, just the two of us, and sometimes Sean, getting the word out.
That's awesome.
Sean is my boyfriend.
Cool. And it sounds like he's a great supporter of what you do. So
yes.
Nice.
He's magical.
Excellent. I did want to ask, Heather, was it tough clearing the rights for the song? You guys mentioned the song that you used that Jeremy was singing, and you know that became amazing in the film. Was it tough clearing the rights in general for the song?
That was easy to get because that was just sort of a regular place. The amount of it cost some dollars, but when we reached out to our punk rock community was, here is our music.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yes. Because Meta Goodwin was a music supervisor that we had. He used to book a lot of those bands in the 80s and in the 90s, and it just covers so many years of punk rock. So what we did is that we had a whole bunch of bands sign off on a chunk of music, even bands that aren't in the movie, and then Jenn brought it into the edit. And what I love as like someone who watches things repeated times is that I didn't know the first time I watched it, but I think the second, third time, and Jenn, you could talk about this more, is that how the songs are either about that scene, like actual content of the songs, or sort of like projecting in the future.
Yeah.
Like how you use the lyrics to sort of build almost a secondary or tertiary narrative in the Ranger.
Yeah. I think every song has thematically something to do with what's happening in the scene or what's happening in the story. But you know, it was such a special experience to be able to sit there with my edit and to be able to sit there with all this amazing music that the bands had already said that they wanted to be involved in the film. So I really just got to like choose what made sense, both pacing and story-wise for each scene. So, you know, just to say one thing about it is like when the punks are kind of in control, the soundtrack is all punk music. But then when the punks start to lose their footing in the woods, it shifts into more of our composers' music, which is much more, it's Wade McNeil and Andrew Gordon McPherson. And their music, you know, we talked about John Carpenter, but we talked about John Carpenter with this like punk edge aesthetic to it. So, but that's the Rangers world. And then of course, in the end, when you're in the Ranger's cabin, then you go into the country music. So there is the music throughout the film is telling a story if you choose to pay attention to it.
Nice. And what was the most challenging thing about making this film?
Heather, what's your...
I love to tell the story about getting the van, because at this budget and what we wanted to do with it, it's not a place to rent a picture car in the New York City area. So we bought it about 20 minutes from Jenn's parents' house in Northwest Jersey. Like after we looked all over the tri-state area, the van in that movie was 20 minutes away from her parents' house. And then it was the smartest idea to grab it, fix it, make sure everything worked on it, and then have most of the cast and crew, including our amazing executive producer, going in there with his boys and decorating the van. And it's related to the van in Return of the Living Dead, because it's sort of like the baby version of that. And then on a side story, it's like getting the wolves in 3 days.
Oh yeah.
I felt more of like my ward dialing ability from DVD Supplement World, that if you place enough phone calls, you will get a yes.
That's good advice. Definitely good producing advice. So before we move to the second portion of the podcast, which
I was going to say, for Jenn, what was your most challenging part of this filmmaking?
I think it was we had to climb up a mountain to get the final fight scene, and it was
it that 1 mile walk? Was it that 1 mile walk from the van to the cabin? Was that the most?
Yeah, it was worse than that. But in theory, yeah, because cars couldn't go where we wanted to shoot near this fire tower. So we had to walk, and the crew had to like carry all the equipment, and the actors had to walk. And it was like, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours up this really steep terrain. So I felt a lot of anxiety about making my actors do that, but they had such a good time. Jeremy like ran up it. He was having a blast. So it all turned out all right, but that was physically the hardest thing, because we all had to,
What about technically?
Hiking. Technically, what was the hardest thing? I don't know. It was just such a dream. I loved every minute of it. I was like getting to like live my greatest dream. There was nothing hard. It was just so much fun.
We could talk about the whimsical sequence in the woods, which I think is probably the most dreamlike and magical, when it was all hands on set trying to do the sort of poor man's process with the van, with everybody like holding a branch and prancing towards the van. Because like Abe's not moving in that car. That's like every PA creating shadows with branches on the side. That was a magical night. And just those nights going into day.
Yeah, the hardest part is doing night shoots when you'll have the sun coming up. So there's no way to push. Like you have to finish the day before the sun comes up. That maybe was the hardest thing.
And from a production standpoint, you can push that time period, because when I look at those times and you swear to God, it's like it's daylight. This is not going to read. Totally reads. I have no idea. It's the magic of cinema, that you could push that early into the morning and it still feels like night on camera.
That is pretty amazing. And it seems like you guys did all practical effects, right?
Yep.
It's Brian Spears and his crew.
Which is awesome.
Green axe wounds.
Fantastic.
All that great stuff.
Was that challenging, or, just planning that out and just sort of dealing with all that?
It's not challenging. It just takes time. So, Brian Spears, our effects master, and his team roll up in their makeup truck with all their body parts in the back. And everyone like stops to look at the body parts, and, and then actually getting the shots takes a while. And then you have to reset. If you don't get it on the first take, you have to reset, and when you have a lot of blood and stuff, that takes time. So the only hard part about it is making sure that you have enough time to get it right.
Nice. So I'd like to move to the second portion of the podcast, and I'd like to discuss your favorite scene, or it doesn't have to be your favorite scene, but one remarkable scene from any movie of all time. And maybe Jenn, we'll start with you.
Okay. I mean, it's a tough question, but when you asked me a couple of days ago, the scene that was on my mind at that time, which I will talk about today, is the subway scene in Maniac,
The original Maniac, right? From
the original 1980 Maniac. And I think it was on my mind because I had just watched it recently on Shudder. I had seen it a long time ago, and I have to say that I think that that's one of the reasons why I live in New York, and walking alone at night around the subway, not that I've done it recently because of coronavirus, but back when I used to walk home and take the subway home at night, like the subway is a scary ass place. And like that scene kind of scarred me and has been on my mind many a time. And I also think it perfectly captures, when she runs and tries to get onto the train, but the train pulls away. That moment of frustration. I know she's running away from like a serial killer, but I think that moment perfectly captures the frustration we all feel when we just miss the train. Especially
late at night when trains only run once in a while on the very late night.
Yeah, that's the worst.
That's the worst.
So I think about that scene a lot, and I was thinking about that scene when you asked me what scene I wanted to talk about. I love the colors. I mean, I love the whole movie, but I love the mix. Like, it's such a beautiful movie, but it's such a gritty, grimy movie too. And definitely in that subway scene, I love it's so gritty, but at the same time, it's so beautiful, especially the colors in that bathroom, the turquoise and the yellow and the graffiti. It's like my eyes just feel so good looking at it. And yeah, I mean, it's genuinely, it's paced really well. I've heard that they stole those shots. Maybe I should go back and just talk about what the scene is for anyone who hasn't heard it. Okay, who hasn't seen the movie. So there's a nurse, and she's leaving her work at the hospital, and she is being followed. She goes down the subway. I think it's Columbus Circle. She goes down into the subway. She just misses the train. She feels like Joe Spinell is following her, and he is. She tries to leave the subway, but she can't. Every exit is locked. She goes into the bathroom, and she hides in a bathroom stall. Joe Spinell comes in. He, hovers nearby. She thinks he's like the killer that everybody's talking about, and that he's about to kill her. And she's right about that. But he walks away. He's like fucking with her. And finally she comes out. She looks in the mirror. She thinks that she laughs at herself, like, oh my God, how could I have thought that guy was going to kill me? This is the grossest part. She puts her face under the sink water and like wipes her face, which is like gross.
That's gross even in a pre-coronavirus world.
Yeah. Like, even if this was not a horror movie and that's just what the scene was, like, that would be disturbing enough. Anyway, she comes back up to look at herself in the mirror, and then Joe Spinell's right behind her and stabs her in the back with a sword. And then he washes the sword off in the sink. But the way that it's captured, there's so much tension. In my opinion, it's the best sequence of the movie. He shoots her through the bars when she's trying to leave the subway. He shoots her like through the bars. And I was actually reading an interview with Bill Lustig where he said that he had Texas Chainsaw Massacre on his mind for that scene. And he said he had Repulsion on his mind for the scene that takes place in the bathroom, in the apartment, the girl's apartment bathroom later on in the movie, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I think I feel the same way when I watch that scene as I do when I watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I think it's fitting.
I will say that movie genuinely horrified me. Like, there's very, very few, probably only 2 movies in the world that I've seen that have like genuinely horrified me. I don't know. It's a very disturbing film. And maybe because you're it's one of the rare movies where you're actually following the killer. I guess like you're really like on his journey. And so it's even crazier,
Yeah. You're seeing the details of his life.
And those action shots of Joe Spinell, like when he actually is doing the killings, they're just like, there's something about his face that's so expressive and so disturbing.
And he's really sweaty a lot in it. And he's another killer that does not wear a mask, which I appreciate. The Ranger also does not wear a mask.
True.
And I also just love, I love movies from that time period. I love like late 70s, early 80s, gritty New York City movies. And I love that this captures, the Son of Sam years of the time. And I think that they shot the Tom Savini scene under the Verrazano Bridge, like really close to where there was the Son of Sam murder.
Wow.
So I don't know. My dad grew up in the Bronx, and he was like a teenager around this time. And there's something about it that is like, so, although I wasn't born yet, it's so nostalgic for me. So I love Maniac, and I love these kinds of movies. And I think that scene really captures everything I love about it.
Nice. I think so I grew up in the Bronx, and my parents used to go to a video store. We used to, it was like my favorite thing in the world. And just going to this video store to rent VHS tapes. And I swear, I think that might have been one of the rentals. I definitely saw that movie when I was a kid, whether it might have been on HBO or it might have been rented from the local video store. I don't think my parents rented a ton of horror films, but I definitely watched a lot of horror films when I was a kid. And even in the Bronx on Channel 11, they would, on like Friday the 13th, if it happened to be like a Friday the 13th, they would always show the Friday the 13th movies. And me and my cousins would always watch those movies, and we loved it.
I remember watching it. I rented it on VHS and watching it with my father. And during the shotgun scene, he goes, "That's very realistic." And that is my favorite memory of the movie Maniac.
That's funny.
That is funny.
Deadpan, very realistic in his Jersey City accent.
Yeah, and I mean, in the 1980s, riding the subway was really taking a gamble with your life at that time, on a good day.
Yeah, it's true.
But definitely good choice. I think there was only one thing that was a bridge too far in that movie. How he asked that beautiful model out on a date. She's like, "Oh yeah, sure, let's go out to dinner." And then like they're just dating all of a sudden. I'm like, I don't know. I don't really buy him and her.
I love that scene where he like visits her photo shoot, and he like gets her a doll, and he's like sitting there with the doll on his lap, and you actually kind of feel like, oh my God, like you actually feel I feel empathetic for him in that moment. I'm like, oh my God, if you were like brought up differently, like all you want is to be loved, I think. I don't know.
No, it's a valid point. I think even the villains, they justify their behavior, in their mind, they're good. I'm sure, I mean, did you feel that way about the Ranger in your movie? Like in his mind, like he wasn't the bad guy.
No, the Ranger, and I think actually a lot of people who watch it feel this way too, because the kids are littering and they're playing their music loud, and it's like, shut up, kids. There's certainly a world
pushing his buttons for sure.
Yeah, there's a world of the Ranger. Like there's a version of the Ranger. You could watch it with the Ranger being the hero, and it all makes complete sense. And also, I think that he and Jeremy, I think, would speak to this too, that the Ranger really just wants to connect with someone, and he feels like he feels like Chelsea will understand him. And he's wrong about that, but he feels like there's some shared connection between him and Chelsea, and all he really wants is love too. And I think a lot of our serial killers just need a little bit of love and understanding.
I remember, Jen, you and I were driving around upstate New York looking for locations, coming up with fanfic of the Ranger's love life and story. It's like, was he a virgin? Did he just find people and just stalk them and go, this person's now my girlfriend? It's like, what's going on in his mind? It's true. Jeremy thought he was the hero, and I would say villain, and then anyone would say that he would correct you, and he goes, no, just what Jen said. He's very misunderstood. And Ranger Twitter did a poll of who to back, and it was 50-50. And some people are going like, why are all these people on the side of authority? But it is true. It can be watched both ways.
That's hysterical. All right, Heather. So let's talk about the scene from one of your favorite movie scenes.
All right. So I'm a huge horror fan, as everyone knows, but I'm also, based on my bandana collection, a huge Western fan. So I picked the scene, Ecstasy of Gold, from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'm very inspired by the works of Leone and a lot of not the American Westerns, but a lot of the Italian Westerns, because I feel they deal with like death, the embodiment of death, and these sort of archetypical cowboy figures, the starkness, the unforgiving nature of existence. A lot of this is in those movies. One of the most classic ones is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Now, when I think of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and I think of the scene, I always think of the scene, which I feel like Tarantino has put many times in his movies, sort of like the standoff at the end. But before the standoff happens, there's a great sequence, and also the Marconi score is named after it, Ecstasy of Gold. So Tuco, who is the bastard throughout the entire movie, he finally gets to this graveyard. It's a vast graveyard, completely built as far as the eye can see, all these great wooden crosses, and like a child. And it brings the audience with them. It's like, I am here, I've made it, I'm alive, I'm going to find my gold. And the flamboyancy of the camera moving around, the joy with him, the music. I think it's a very bold scene in that movie to bring Tuco, the character, and the film itself into this sort of like childlike ecstatic state with soaring music, patterns of the graveyard, camera movement, and of course Eli Wallach.
Oh man,
I think it's very interesting. When I was thinking about movies to talk about, I was thinking about what I call like un petit set pieces, which is like, I always think about not a huge sequence in a film, but like moments in film. It's like Norris head in the thing creeping away, or like, Leatherface spinning his chainsaw right at the end of the film before you cut to black. I always think about like those like less than minute sequences. But for me, it's like, it's very interesting to talk about the Ecstasy of Gold sequence, just because of how it's so transformational for that character, who's a very complex character in that movie.
Well, it's a great choice. I mean, that's definitely one of the best films ever made, which is crazy because I guess it wasn't critically acclaimed at the time, which blows my mind. That I guess, the LA Times, when The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly came out, apparently sort of ripped it as being like a subpar sort of Western. Honestly, I prefer a lot of the spaghetti Westerns to a lot of the American Westerns, personally.
Well, I think, again, the more philosophical, and because it's not their culture, there's a distance where they could create sort of a poetry in the work. Because I love that they're elliptical. I love there's a lot of like near far photography. You get macros, these beautiful framing and doorways and sets, and again, like the faces of the Italian Western. It's like Fellini or Pasolini. Is that you get so, and that's your narrative, because these movies are not about plots. They're truly cinematic. It's like, here's a fate, here's an environment, here's a gun, here's a graveyard. There's no dialogue for the first 10 minutes of that film, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. There's no dialogue for the first 10 minutes of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which you don't even notice because it's so cinematic that you don't even really think about it. I feel the same, and I draw a line in the sand about Fury Road. Is that's also, to me, an incredibly cinematic achievement, to tell that much story with not that much dialogue, and doing it with production design, faces, location, that you get what's going on. Yeah. And I mean that score by Ennio Morricone was hands down my favorite score ever. Also an important score, because that's what hardcore bands walk out to in New York City. Yes, that's true. The theme. Yeah, I think Agnostic Front uses that theme to walk out on stage. Agnostic Front did use that song. That's very true. Yes, and there's like a punks and cowboys unity there. I mean, if you just think about like how Joe Strummer used to dress. True. Yeah, certainly. I wore spurs, boots. Yeah. We're archetypical with our mohawks. But great choice. So what's next on the agenda, guys? Heather, you mentioned briefly that you and Jen are collaborating on a future project. Are you able to talk about that at all, or not really? Jen can give you hints out in the world, in the universe.
We can't say that much about it.
No.
Just a project we're really excited about.
All right. Well, at least there is a future work from the two of you. That's something that we could look forward to.
And I've been working in the background with my slate and putting together an ultimate project called Black Mansion, which is including all my slates, and hopefully could be a place that collects stories and voices, and I feel in a genre landscape that needs more different types of storytellers. As I tell people, the Black Mansion films that I'm trying to create, it's like in CBGBs, where like the last song and you pull everybody up on stage and everybody's together.
Yes,
that's what I want it to feel like.
The production company version of that.
Mm-hmm.
The production company version of that.
It would be the production company version of that whole Black Mansion film. So that's sort of like hiding in the background, being worked on.
Sounds intriguing. Where could people follow along with you guys, and where could they go and watch The Ranger?
The Ranger is available on Shudder, and it's also available on Amazon Prime and DVD and Blu-ray and
VHS novelization.
We made it. Yeah, we have a novel written by Ed Kurtz. We have the vinyl. We have like so much swag around it too.
Like audio commentary, director's commentary with the Blu-ray.
Yep.
Amazing.
As I am a DVD supplement producer, there are some DVD supplements on that Blue. There are five of them, and a commentary.
First of all, I appreciate the fact that you are a supplement producer, because I think that's something that's getting lost on the newer generation of streaming movies. That, I'm like, why aren't they making commentaries for films on like Netflix and stuff like that? I would see them. I think there's a lot of people that would see them. I used to watch, buy DVDs just to watch the commentary sometime. And
a lot of people say that was their film school, is commentaries and extras, right?
Yeah. Hopefully that'll come back even in streaming. We should make a push for that. As filmmakers.
Yeah. Well, The Ranger is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And by the way, my Facebook URL is Joe Spinell Lives, which is 100% true. And the name of my phone is Joe Spinell.
That's amazing. And
then in my bedroom is where I keep my Mondo Maniac poster, which is the black and red 3/4 of Spinell. So I love Jenn's choice.
Can I see? Do you have it?
It's right there. Ooh.
Oh, nice. Ooh.
Because Joe belongs in the bedroom.
I like his role in The Godfather film.
Oh, yeah. Cheech. I love him, too. That's a very dramatic scene. That's, again, like un petit set piece.
Yes.
Him coming in through the shave, coming in, shooting. That's not even a minute. Those are the ones that's memorable. That lives in my heart.
Well, I'll definitely put the social links on the show notes. I appreciate the both of you so much. Look forward.
And I was going to say, Jenn, you're available. Where can everybody find you?
Oh, same thing. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
Well, thanks again, Jenn and Heather. Appreciate the both of you so much for being on the cast. Great talking to the both of you, and look forward to seeing your future works.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, man.
The FilmSEEN podcast is hosted by Zeph Kota. Today's guests were Heather Buckley and Jenn Wexler. Original music by Yuri Rybak. Executive producer Jeff Cutler. Sponsored by Alphabet City Films.